Welcome to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. David, as always, a lot of content to get to, but first and foremost this week, congratulations on the 5th anniversary of Retire Smart.
Yeah, pretty cool. As of this recording this morning, we are 5 years old today, and this is actually our 241st radio show. So we've only missed, I think, 9 weeks there, possible, or whatever it is, something like that, out of possible recordings since we started this thing. And boy, has it been a wild ride. We've been blessed to help hundreds and hundreds of families here locally, Chip. It's just, it's amazing because thinking about it, when you were still at your old job and you'd come by and visit us and buy us a space heater, and we were in that little office.
Don't bring me a fruit basket. Bring a space heater. It's freezing over here. We've upgraded since then.
Yeah, I mean, when you came by there, I think I had 3 employees other than myself at that time you first visited us, and now
Alicia's still with you, your first employee.
Yeah, and now we're up well over 35, 38 employees, something like that. I don't even know. I know we got a couple more starting next week. So anyway, it's been an amazing ride, and it's really cool as we've been accoladed by a couple of national publications now. 401k Specialist magazine put us in an article recently naming us the second fastest retirement planning growing firm in the country. That was really unique to find. And then, of course, we made the Inc. 5,000 fastest private companies growing in America. I think we were 1,769. So been a blessing all the way around. I recently actually had a client in one of the classes I just taught. I taught the Medicare class a couple weeks back, just popped in, decided to do it because I like to stay fresh at that. And one of our clients has been with us since the beginning, came up into that class and said, "This has just been amazing to watch, David. This is unbelievable how big and how fast this thing is growing, and you're helping so many people." So it's nice to get that feedback from our client base directly. But yeah, what an amazing ride. So blessed to help people, and hope we can continue, and continue helping thousands and thousands of people in the future.
Well, and the best is yet to come. David, it's been another busy week at Retire Smart. We had another round of taxes in retirement presentations, dinner presentations. How did those go?
Those went really, really well. And, I can tell you there is some urgency on some of the things we're talking about now because we are getting into the final phase of the year, and some of the tax saving strategies you're going to lose out on if you don't take action. So if you've been listening to this program for any length of time and have always think, maybe I should give a call or find out what's possible, I would really, really urge you to pick up the phone and take action now. We have a lot of things that are going to be changing. We have some new taxes that are coming to the corporate world starting January 1st, and there's some strategies you may want to consider before you get to year end. So I cannot stress enough, time is of the essence in this tax planning world.
Well, with that in mind, let me mention we have another round of estate planning workshops coming up. You and Mike Schudel will get into more detail on that in the second segment of the show. And one other note, friends, we are sponsoring a blood drive this week. Retire Smart is sponsoring a Red Cross blood drive Thursday, October 27th, 9 to 4. What you do is go to redcrossblood.org, redcrossblood.org, and then in the search box you type in Retire Smart, all one word. It'll give you available times, gives you a map to our place. The big red bus will be here. And David, that's something you do about once a quarter, sponsor a Red Cross blood drive.
Absolutely. And, there's a shortage in the community, and, you never know when you're going to need it. So it's actually healthy to give blood. It's a good thing for you to do. So we encourage folks to at least consider doing that as one of the many ways we like to encourage people giving back to their community.
All right, here we go, David. Last week, you predicted a range. I said, David, well, one of our questions in the Q&A was, what will the increase in Social Security be in 2023? You said, I see a range of 8.6 to 9.3. Well, your crystal ball was accurate. The actual number came in at 8.7%. Your take on that, David?
Well, I still think it's on the light side, and I don't like the calculation because after we got September's numbers, they came out with this number a little early. Actually released this number 2 days earlier than they had said they would, and it's lighter than the computation says it should be, at least in my math. So, and there was a little bit of ruffles in Congress. A couple of Congress people were talking about that number should be a little bit higher, but it's not going to change. But 8.7 is a big raise relative. The average is about 2.4 since inception on Social Security. So good news is exactly our seniors are all going to get this raise January 1st, those that are taking Social Security. And for you that are not taking Social Security, you get the raise too. I want to make sure you understand that. Just because you haven't turned it on doesn't mean you don't get this. This goes into your estimated payment, gets the same COLA bump.
David, you sent the team a chart that was very striking. It reminds me of the old game Etch-a-Sketch. You're probably old enough to remember that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, the screen with the knobs and the zigzaggy lines and so forth. And this zigs and zags a bit. But this is an image of 2006 to 2008, actually April 2006 to July 2008, and then July 2020 to today. It's the S&P 500 index, and it's eerie the way the current segment almost mirrors that of 2006, 2008, which was, of course, not a good time for the S&P 500.
Well, they say those that don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it, and it's when you chart this on a chart, exactly, and I sent this to you guys so you could visually see what I was talking about, and in the advisor meetings, we talk about where we think the markets may be going and what may be happening. It's very eerie how this is literally blanking over, and it's not that far off from 2001, 2002 either, by the way. I didn't share that with the whole team, but it is a little scary, and if that were to come to fruition, again, no one here is the great prognosticator, but in 2008, Chip, the market made a major bottom in October, which we find ourselves in now here in 2022. And then the markets rallied mightily, and people thought, woohoo, it's over, it's all clear. No, we rallied into the new year, and then we fell down to an even new low, even further down, and that was very painful. The market was actually down over 50% from peak to trough, and we bottomed March 9th of 2009. Could we repeat that? Well, it's certainly in the realm of possibility. I will tell you on the positive side, historically speaking, after midterm elections, you typically have about a 7.5% rally through the end of the year. So at least we may rally up, but that doesn't mean it will be all clear. People need to take heed. We've got unprecedented, ugly economic data coming. Earnings are just barely meeting expectations, and most companies that report thus far are lowering future expectations. So the likelihood that this bear market is over or even near over is unfortunately not that high right now. So what can you do about that, Chip? We would highly encourage folks to get the risk analysis we offer here as the R in the SMART plan. So please consider that if you've never had it done. Find out how much risk you are taking in your portfolio and what you may be able to do about that.
No charge, by the way, for that, no obligation. We'd be glad to do that for you. David, in the meantime, in the here and now, CNBC headline, consumer spending was flat in September and below expectations as inflation takes toll. That bugaboo of inflation is still harassing us.
It is, and unfortunately it's going to be here heavier for longer, which means higher rates are coming. And they're going to be here longer than most of the talking heads, again, out there in the financial media are willing to talk about. This nonsense of pivot, that conversation quieted down this week, right? We talked about that a little bit last week because of the inflation data is not good. And so one of the ways we measure how the healthy of the consumer is consumer spending. And on the good news is it came in, woohoo, it didn't drop a lot, but it was, you got to remember, when we measure consumer spending, we don't adjust that for inflation. So the amount of goods and services went down, but the dollar amount of sales was basically flat, right?
So it's the higher prices that make it look like there was more spending, but
exactly.
There are not more goods and services being purchased.
Correct. And I will tell you, one of the bellwethers in consumer staples, right? These are things you're going to buy just about no matter what. Whatever the economic condition, you're most likely still going to buy deodorant and toothpaste, right? So Procter & Gamble is one of those companies you want to pay attention to how the consumer. Well, they just reported earnings this morning, all right? And their earnings that came out as of this recording, they had sales growth up 1%, but their pricing was up 9% because of the inflationary pressures. So that tells you the consumer on staples is buying almost 10% less goods and services. That is a leading indicator telling us it's not looking good for retail sales here going forward in the coming quarters. And I will tell you, we'll see how Christmas works out this year. Now, last year, I will tell you, retail sales spiked early in October. Normally, they don't spike until November for the holiday season. Why? Well, number one, last year everyone was concerned, including us, we talked about here, with supply chain issues. That is not on the table this year. So people are not pre-spending, and they could not keep up with these numbers, and they're not forecasting. Procter & Gamble lowered their estimates to the lower end of their future range, predicting, unfortunately, less ability of the consumer to continue spending. So not good data right now, unfortunately.
David, I'm going to squeeze this in quickly. As we zero in on the general election of this election cycle, fingers are being pointed back and forth. Here's a Fox Business headline. Government data proves corporate greed isn't causing inflation, contrary to Democrat claims. The prices for producers, David, are rising even ahead of the prices for consumers. Looks like the producers are not passing it all on to the consumers.
In fact, no. Most of these companies are actually shrinking their margins to try and maintain sales, right? And so this is just, unfortunately, in this world of social media, if you go on the Ilk app, Twitter, and I do go on there and get some information, but there are people that are just saying this inflation's out of control and it's corporate America's fault, like they're gouging the employee. That's not how it works. If you overcharge, people will stop buying your product. That's how free markets work. So companies are trying to do everything they can to maintain or increase their sales. That's what they're supposed to do. And so if they can cut the price to keep people buying their products, we just talked about that, then they'll do so, right? So corporate greed is nowhere in the equation on why inflation is here. Inflation is here because the raw materials that go into produce goods and services is up, and it's not coming down anytime soon.
David, you mentioned it's a great time for people to get a risk analysis for their portfolios. That is part of the report card that we offer, the complimentary report card. No charge, no obligation. We look at your entire financial situation. Maybe you're in good shape. Maybe you need to make a few changes. Find out. Get the complimentary report card by calling 402-369-7777. 402-369-7777. Up next, David Brooks. Welcome back to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. Our special guest this week is an experienced financial advisor who also is an attorney, a certified financial planner, and a finance teacher at Creighton University. He's our go-to guy on estate planning, and we're glad to have him back for another visit. David, please introduce our special guest.
Yeah, thank you, Chip. Yeah, we've got back on the show one of our advisors. In fact, he's been with me the longest, and he's got gazillion sets of letters behind his name there. I think actually 8 sets. He's got a law degree, et cetera. Let's welcome back advisor extraordinaire, Mr. Mike Schudel. Mike, welcome back to the show.
Hey, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Hey, we've got another round of estate planning classes here coming up that you are going to be leading again. Can you tell us when those are going to take place?
Yeah, it's going to be Wednesday, November 2nd or Thursday, November 3rd at 6:30 p.m. Now, that's here at our Midwest Learning Center at our offices.
Okay, so you don't have to come to both of those. It's one or the other night. We just run them twice for your convenience, and the class lasts about an hour to an hour and 20 minutes, depending on the content and Q&A. And we also actually have one of our local estate planning attorneys join Mike in the conversation, and the feedback on those is incredibly high. So if you would like to get registered for that, be sure and give us a call here at the end of the show or during the show now at 402-369-7777. So in regards to estate planning, Mike, one of the problems we have often that we run into is we are always trying to help people understand the taxation of the estates, right? Mm-hmm. And those taxes. And there's things that people can be doing to mitigate or lower not only their estate taxes, but of course their income taxes while they're in retirement. And I want to kind of zero in on some guaranteed income a lot of people are going to count on or would be counting on. And we're talking, of course, about defined benefit plans. These are otherwise known as pensions, right? And so when I started in this industry a couple decades ago, it was a very common, about 40% of all large publicly traded companies still offered some form of a pension. It was much higher 2 decades before that, but today it's less than 4% of working class folks are going to be offered a pension. But there are several people out there, millions in fact, that still have pensions, but that is not always as good as it might seem. We're seeing some changes in pensions, and speaking of changes, we've got a little bit of meltdown going on across the pond there in England right now, right?
Yeah, the pensioners in the United Kingdom really had a rough wake-up call. You would think that pensions would be something fairly easy to manage. Just make enough rate of return to pay your retirees and have a little buffer. But we found out over the last 10 days that that's not always the case.
So let's start by how a pension is typically funded, right? So the company, the corporation, or the government for that matter is allegedly supposed to be setting aside some dollars instead of giving them to you now. They're basically taking part of your compensation in reality and putting it into a portfolio and growing it so that when you do retire, they can turn around and turn that into a form of guaranteed income, most likely monthly. Now, the way to do that, as you said, is they're trying to manage a pool of dollars relatively conservative, right? They just want to grow the dollars to keep up with inflation, and then they can distribute that income out of that portfolio. But so these guys are usually going to use what we would consider normally to be, or at least by Wall Street standards, the safer side of the investment aisle, right? Bonds in particular, right?
Yeah, government debt. That's supposed to be the safe warehouse of money on this earth.
And so the longer the maturity, right, the safer in theory it should be, like long-dated bonds. Well, this year, and I don't have the exact data, but it's not good on the gilt. Just so you know, that's England's version of our treasuries, okay? But the 30-year treasury, the long bond here in the U.S. is down over 30% year to date. So imagine if you're managing this pension fund and your assets on the bond side are down 30%. Well, when you think the bonds would be down, at least the equities, of course, would be up on the other side of the portfolio, right? Not the case, right?
No, indeed.
So tell me a little about what is causing all this pain in the pension funds, in particular in the UK. And you may have seen some news stories, folks, and we could be happy to get you this one news story. In fact, CNN has a story talking, I think the title of it is How the Meltdown in a $1 trillion Market Brought the UK on the Brink of a Financial Crisis.
Yeah, so this is going to be a large oversummary of what's going on here. But as those gilts, the UK government debt, crashed, pension funds had to generate collateral, cash, to cover what was going down. So since these pensions had a good portion of their investments in those gilts, the government bonds, when they were selling them, that sent the yields even higher, perpetuating the cycle. So just one thing kind of led to another, and we were in a vicious cycle for a while there.
So if you're out there thinking, wow, could this happen to my pension here? Well, the answer is yes, it's a possibility. I'm not trying to scare people from pensions, right? Most pensions do not have COLA adjustments, but if you're blessed to have a pension, one of the biggest discussions we need to have is if you have a lump sum option available, should you take it versus the lifetime annuity payment they are going to give you. And there's a couple of benefits I want you to talk about, Mike, from why maybe the lump sum might be a better option. Number one, if you were to pass away early in your retirement, your beneficiary is going to get what's left over if you haven't spent the lump sum, right?
Absolutely. If we have access to the lump sum, we can get a little bit more creative because we simply have more flexibility over the tax planning, and those assets will then go to your beneficiaries when you pass versus a traditional pension where once you are done and maybe your spouse gets the survivorship benefit, then the deal is over and any other assets stay with the pension and do not go to your children.
And now, what's happening across the country? I have a really good friend of mine. His company is actually a pension-specific firm based down south in Tennessee. And what they're seeing nationwide in a lot of pensions that they work with is the lump sum options are getting knocked down big time, like 15 or 20%. In other words, someone was going to retire. Maybe they're going to offer them a lump sum of $1.2 million instead of a lifetime annuity. That number is now being knocked down to under $1 million, sometimes 20% reduction, because interest rates have gone up. In other words, the value of that bond portfolio back in the pension is less. So therefore, what they can offer you as a lump sum is less. So the word of caution here is if you are blessed to have already qualified for a pension, and your plan was to continue working, you may want to seriously look at understanding why you may decide to, in fact, retire early. In other words, get your pension dollars out of there. In fact, in that article, they mentioned some people are doing just that, right?
Indeed. Listen, what I just really want to land on is there's not a per se better way to do things. Lump sum or taking the lifetime payout both have advantages and disadvantages, but you have got to pay such close attention to the taxes. That will be one of the biggest pain points that you will feel as a pensioner either way.
Now
we can help.
That's a really good valid point here. So once you turn on pension income, right, and let's say your pension's solvent and you get that income for 30 years, you enjoy a nice long retirement. Every month when you get that check, that is what we call forced income, and it's taxable, right? And if your other guaranteed sources is, say, Social Security, you're now guaranteeing that Social Security, at least 85% of it under current rule, will also now be taxable every single month. Where if you took the lump sum as an option, and again, not appropriate for everyone, we have to do some actuarial math for you, but if that was the case, you're then open up to some tax planning strategies like Roth conversions, right?
Absolutely.
And so in the early years of retirement, especially the next 3 years, why tax rates are lower than they're going to be January 1st, 2026 under current law, you may be able to guarantee yourself a lower tax bill on some of those dollars.
Yeah, we've got a really great opportunity here until January 1st, 2026 to get some great tax planning done.
So how would you recommend someone who's thinking about that or has the pension, what are the next steps? What do they need to be doing or thinking about right now?
Well, please reach out to your pension managing company so that you can get the details. What is the payout? What's the lump sum option? And then give us a call. With that information, we can really build you an income plan so that we can line everything up clearly for you to see and understand. And then we can define exactly the tax savings, whether you take it as a lump sum or as a lifetime income.
Now, here locally, and I've been critical of it in the past, we have a school board here, OPS, that has a very large pension that is underfunded, at least by the state's records, by over $1 billion at last check-in. And, of course, this year, with both the bond and equity markets down over 20% each, that's probably in much worse shape than the last time I even looked, unfortunately. So if you're out there and you're going to be depending upon this pension, I would tell you we have elections coming up, and I would just tell you, find out whoever you're planning on voting for, a county commissioner or school board. The school board members are critically important, and too many people don't pay attention to this stuff, Mike, on what their plans are to make the school boards, if they're offering a pension, is it really viable? Is it going to be funded properly? And if not, what are their plans of action? Because unfortunately, if that pension were to fail here in the city of Omaha, who's going to pay the bill?
Taxpayers.
Yeah, you and I as the John Q taxpayers. So listen, don't sit there and not know what to do. Take a proactive course of action. Get a plan. And like Mike said, you don't even have to call us, but call somebody. Get the pension numbers and then sit down with a financial professional and have them work the numbers out so you can make a valid decision. Man, I can't believe the time is already up on this segment, Mike. I want to thank you for stopping by. And again, if you would like to sign up with Mike for the Estate Planning 101 class, that again is going to be Wednesday, November 2nd at 6:30 p.m. at the Midwest Learning Center, or November 3rd at 6:30. 402-369-7777. Mike, thank you so much for stopping by.
Hey, thanks for the privilege, David.
Absolutely. Chip, what do we got coming up next?
Up next, you have questions. Welcome back to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. Into the Q&A we go. David, the first question is about Social Security. My husband and I are in our early 70s and receive Social Security benefits. I don't want to sound greedy or ungrateful, but an 8.7% increase in the cost of living adjustment is not enough because of inflation. What can we do?
Well, I mean, I wish I could tell you that you could just call the government up and complain, but that's not going to get you anywhere. So if that's just not enough, I will tell you that's a 40-year historical adjustment, and you're not likely to ever get one like that again, maybe next year. Last year, you got a 5.9% increase, so that's a pretty good, healthy increase to Social Security. But now this may lead to a broader problem that, unfortunately, Chip, 2/3 of all retirees rely on Social Security as the single highest piece of income they're going to have in retirement. And we don't want you to be that person in reality. So if you're years away from making retirement, please don't think that Social Security should be the one income source. It was never intended to fully fund your retirement. It was meant to be supplemental income. But unfortunately, that's not the case for a lot of Americans, and that's reality. However, If this increase doesn't keep up with you, I will tell you inflation did peak at about 9% earlier this year. So in theory, you shouldn't be that far off. And inflation is running at a little under 8.2% as we sit today. So this increase could help. But you may not know this. The questioner may not know, but their Medicare Part B premiums are actually going to go down next year, so therefore it actually makes the increase in Social Security a little bit bigger. Not huge, about $6 a month, but if you're a married couple, that's $12 a month. That's an extra $150 a year. That will be back in on top of this 8.7% increase. So now, if you're having a good holistic financial plan, you would have income from other sources lined up. And that's what a good income planner will do, and that's part of our SMART plan. In fact, the S stands for sources of income. And we don't want you relying on just things like Social Security. You may be blessed to have pension income. We talked about that earlier in the show. You may have to take required minimum distributions if you have retirement accounts that have been tax deferred most of your life. You may just have investment accounts where you're getting interest or dividend payments out. And you need to have a well-rounded income plan so that you know where to take income from in the years that maybe you're having a shortfall. Now, the way we will often design the income plans, Chip, is not this just simple inflation-adjusted income that's just going to scale up each year. We talk about the go-go years being very real. When you retire, the first 5 to 7 years, if you plan on doing any kind of world traveling or bucket list items, we'd rather give you more income in the early years so you can enjoy the fruits of your labor, because you are going to slow down. It's reality, because after the go-go years comes the slow-go years and eventually the no-go years. So having a well-designed retirement plan, we call it a SMART plan, covers all these factors, and this questioner could definitely benefit from having a holistic look at everything.
David, even if you're on the high end as a recipient of Social Security, that's only going to be about 25 or 30 grand a year, isn't it?
Well, actually, the top Social Security earners are over $45,000 now. So, Social Security actually is getting up there pretty big, and I will get max Social Security, assuming I get it when I get there. Hopefully, that's a ways off for me. Some of these folks are going to get pretty nice raises, and the average Social Security recipient is receiving almost $1,800 today, right? And so on just the average on $1,800, an almost 9% raise is pretty significant, And so that adds up. If you have $3,000 a month coming in Social Security, and a lot of our clients have more than that in monthly Social Security, think about that. That's $270 roughly in an increased payment. In fact, my wife's parents, they didn't save a lot of money. I talk about it all the time. When Nana and Papa, we affectionately call them. My wife's parents live down in Florida, but they have. He's got a check from the government and a military pension. He's getting, and then 2 Social Security checks and a disability check, and he'll get that COLA bump on all those. And so I was just talking to him yesterday. He's going to get over $550 more a month in income on those payments. And so for a lot of people, this will really help, especially if inflation finally does start to simmer down. And again, it's not going to come way down to 2% as the Fed is trying to do, but it will be much less by the end of next year in the range of 5%.
Couple of 401k questions, David. The first one is, recently you were talking about first-time home buyers. I'm 54, and I know there's a penalty if I withdraw funds from my 401k. But can I use 401k funds penalty-free if the purpose is to buy a new home? I found the home in which I want to retire, and I want to get it now. Can I use 401k funds to do it?
So there are provisions to allow you to access your dollars without the 10% premature penalty if you're doing a first-time home purchase. But now, do you already own a home is the first question. And because if it's a first-time home purchase, yes, technically you could. Now, your 401k has to have that written in the documents. Most will allow this. However, I would highly caution you to step back and think this through. Because one, it's still going to be a taxable event. So if you were to take out, say, $100,000 of your 401k, that's taxable income, even if you don't have to pay the premature 10% penalty. And that income is going to layer now on top of your working income that you're earning. So maybe you're earning, let's just say you're earning $100,000 a year, and you take out $100,000 for this purchase. Now your taxable income is $200,000, pushing you. I just jumped you. If you're a single person, I just took you up a full tax bracket. If you're a married couple, I took you up 2 tax brackets there. So you need to think this through if that is really the best option. I will also tell you, if you're thinking about buying a home, don't. I talked about this last week. In my humble opinion, if you don't have to purchase a home, I think you'll find a much better value a year to a year and a half from now. The housing market is turning south rapidly, and I've got a lot of friends that are realtors. I have several clients that are realtors, and of course, I know they like to put on a happy face. We'll be due. It'll be a little lower. It's going to get ugly in housing nationwide, and there may be a much better opportunity to purchase that real estate at a better price in the near future. Now, if you feel you have to move forward on this, you may have another provision. And again, it must be within the documents of your current 401k, but most 401ks allow you to borrow up to 50% of the value of the fund. This would not be a taxable event. So you could borrow, if you had $500,000 in your 401k, you could borrow up to $250,000 in this example from the 401k. Now, you're going to pay it back through payroll deduction. There's going to calculate a loan. They're going to charge interest. But some plans, that interest will actually go back in your account. Your money, though, will not be invested anymore. You need to make sure they're going to sit on the sideline in what they call a stable value fund to act as collateral for that loan. But you could at least access those dollars in the near term if you needed to without paying the tax bill. But you do have to pay that bill back, and if you were to lose your job, you're only going to have about 90 days to get that loan paid back, or that's a taxable distribution. So a lot of things to figure in there. Again, this is where you want to get competent advice of a financial professional. Whoever you choose to go to needs to be versed in the rules and the laws, and make sure they sit down and show you all those options. And that's what a good financial planner will do.
Another 401k question, David. My wife and I are in our early 60s and plan to retire in 5 years, but we're starting to wonder if that's too soon. We have about $500,000 combined in our 401ks. I have 2 and my wife has 1. How much do we need to retire comfortably?
Well, that really depends on how much you want to spend comfortably, okay?
That's why you have to do a whole entire plan and make sure it all fits.
Absolutely. And there used to be a company. They have orange letters. You can figure out who they are. They changed their name. You start with an I, now with a V. But they used to run these commercials all over town or nationwide. And it's like people were walking around with this number, if you remember those commercials. And it was this big number. And some people would have 680 or 1,000, blah, blah, blah. Somebody would have a 7-digit number. And it was like your number needed to retire. So it was like this goal that you're hitting this magical number. And when I was a kid, it was always like, cool, man, I want to get $1 million, right? That would be the number. The reality is you have to start with what your income needs will be. And again, this is where a real financial plan is not just about picking assets and hoping they grow, right? Hey, I hope you do well. No. You have to have a written income plan that is inflation adjusted, so you know the day you plan on retiring, where the income's going to come from, and you're going to have 2 types of income, and that's it. Guaranteed and non-guaranteed, right? When I say guaranteed, I'm talking about the full faith and credit of the U.S. government. So if you're blessed to have Social Security or maybe railroad income, and then if you're blessed to get a pension, that's pretty reliable, and then you're going to have the income, you're going to rely on your portfolio. In this example, they say they have about $500,000 saved. Well, a safe distribution rate would depend on how old you are. There's a rule of thumb in our industry called the 4% rule. We do not follow that here because you can run out of money. But if you were to take a 4% distribution, just using that quick math, Chip, that'd be $20,000 plus your Social Security. Could you live on that number? So we have to do an expense understanding of what your expenses are. And this is, again, what a full comprehensive financial plan is. But unfortunately, this is not what most people get when they go to financial advisors in our industry. But yes, we could show you how to do that. And not only that, you mentioned you have 2 and your wife has 1. Is that an old 401k? Is that the best place? You may have options to start mitigating taxes now via Roth conversions. If one of those old ones rolled to an IRA, there's a lot of opportunity based on just the information shared there.
David, we're out of time for Q&A this week, but if people would like to call in and schedule a 15-minute phone conference with one of our advisors, how many openings do we have this week?
Unfortunately, we only have 3. The schedule, as I mentioned last week, gets really tight the end of the year here because of the urgency, and we have a lot of folks that are kind of, hey, can I get in? Can I get in? Can I get in? And so, unfortunately, it kind of cuts down on some of our time available, and me and the team of advisors we have. So don't hesitate if that's you. Get one of those scheduled. You can talk to a licensed financial advisor and ask them your most pressing questions.
The end of the year rushes on, so don't wait. We only have 3 spots this week. 402-369-7777. There's no charge, no obligation. A 15-minute phone conference with one of our licensed advisors. 402-369-7777. Up next, we've condemned elected office holders for insider trading. What about unelected bureaucrats trading stocks in companies they own? Welcome back to Retire Smart with David Brooks. I'm Chip Maxwell. Well, David, I guess we could title this segment financial shenanigans, and that's putting it gently. Here's the first headline. This is from the Wall Street Journal. Federal officials trade stock in companies their agencies oversee. I'm reading this story, David, and a chant is echoing in my head. Drain the swamp. Drain the swamp. Am I overreacting?
No, not at all. This is absolute heresy. This is ridiculous that this can go on. When we put somebody, whether an elected or unelected official, into a position to regulate commerce in this country and various industries, if they are going to oversee that industry, do you think they might have some sway on the viability of a particular company based on a ruling or a judgment or a decision that they might make? Is that something that's possible, Chip?
Well, you're getting into a fox in charge of the henhouse situation if they're going to act that way.
And so we've talked about, politicians both left and right? So you had the old senator who didn't get elected and reelected in Georgia last cycle, whose husband is the president of the NASDAQ exchange. You have Nancy Pelosi, whose husband brags on making insider trades all the time on social media, and it's ridiculous that this is not being prosecuted, et cetera, and that we'd have to have a rule. I, as a licensed security person, cannot use insider trading or I can go to jail, Chip. Yet folks here are doing basically the same thing. And we have people in industries, and it's what's scary is it's across the board, right? You have people that are working for the SEC. Over 25% of the employees at the SEC have basically now admitted, doing a study the last 5 years, to be making insider trades. This is ridiculous. It's an outrage.
You talk about Fox in charge of the henhouse, the SEC, this Treasury, EPA, Defense, IRS,
Treasury Department, you name it. I mean, it's a little scary that this could be happening at this alarming rate. And again, put the politics aside. Yes,
this isn't one or two people. It's
no,
dozens.
2,600 officials have been found to have made these trades.
Thousands,
So ridiculous. And on that, now get this. So I sent you an article. We just had the president of the Atlanta Fed. Okay, the Federal Reserve, right? And so basically you have the Federal Reserves. We have multiple locations where the Federal Reserve, voting members of the Federal Reserve, which is the biggest monetary policy decisions that can be made, right, on if money's going to be loose or tight. And Mr. Bostic is his name, and the Washington Post ran an article, and this is the Washington Post now calling him out.
Not the Washington Times.
No, this is a pretty left-leaning paper, let's face it, owned by Mr. Bezos, right? And he admitted after being caught, I didn't really understand the rules.
Yeah.
Excuse me? You didn't understand the rules? He made hundreds of trades.
You are, it's like a bishop in the financial world. You're one of the top stewards of our financial system, and you didn't understand the transaction? No, I'm not buying what you're selling.
Well,
friend.
So here's what I would tell you. What you got to do is you need to call your representative here. And obviously in the House of Representatives, that would be Don Bacon. And he's up for election, so that may not be Don Bacon. We'll see. But you still have two senators you should be calling, Fisher and Sass, who, if he's going to work. I don't know if he's just quit on us. It seems that he has. But, and you should tell them, look, we want to see some legislative action taken here so this cannot happen going forward. I have no problem with people investing their dollars. In fact, they should be allowed to invest. Everyone should be allowed to invest to grow, the economic pie for their family. But when you're in one of these positions, it simply needs to go into a blind trust. It's very simple, where you would hire someone like us to manage those funds in a blind trust. So you don't know what you're buying and selling. We're just trying to grow it based on your time horizon, risk tolerance, and all these other factors. But these guys are actually making moves based on the decisions that they're making. And Bostic believes that, I didn't think it really counted for me, and he profited mightily over this, and it's absolute ridiculousness that it happened.
David, there was another strange financial dealing. Well, here's the headline from the Daily Beast. Investment hyped by Bill O'Reilly was Ponzi scheme, Feds say. Now, my understanding after reading the story is O'Reilly himself isn't implicated. He was just a front man or a spokesman. But there was something fishy going on under the surface here.
Yeah, and he was pitching basically a real estate investment through commercials, and I remember hearing them, and they were a lot on like satellite radio, et cetera. And it was not only O'Reilly, by the way; it was NFL Hall of Famer Lawrence Taylor,
All-Pro linebacker for the Giants.
Yep. Yeah. So he was one of those that was pitching it as well. And basically, what it turned out to be about a $650 million Ponzi scheme. And basically, the ads were promising, if I remember reading it correctly, about a 12% annualized return on the low end.
Well, they're supposed to be buying and developing real estate projects, and we're going to have at least a 12% return on the investment for you. The National Realty Investment Advisors, sounds legitimate, and it's got big-time spokesmen. But they were the top collaborators were just lining each other's pockets. Apparently, they weren't developing any real estate projects.
Correct, and the guy who was kind of in charge of this, who's been in trouble before, that should be the first red flag. What was his name? Salzano. He was paying his wife over $3,000 a week, and she didn't actually work there. And they were basically padding the expenses and taking the new money in to pay for all their lavish expenses and pulling dollars out. And of course, the investors ended up not getting the returns they were promised. And so I think there was over 18 different counts that they were charged with in the indictment, what have you. And then of course they ended up pleading guilty of securities fraud, and they'll try to make some kind of settlement. But of course, what do? They file for bankruptcy. So unfortunately, the investor is left holding the bag in situations like this.
Well, here's the sentence that really sent a chill down my spine. Among the investors were 382 retirees who contributed more than $94.8 million from their retirement accounts. As you often mention, David, people at that stage of life, they may not have a chance to recover from that kind of a hit.
No, and we see people, and it's not just this, it's all kinds of advertisements. Folks, if it's too good to be true, it's probably too good to be true. So when it comes to real estate investments, and I used to kind of, I don't like the privately traded, what's called REITs, that's real estate investment trust, because you don't get to fully look under the hood. So there are plenty of publicly traded legitimate investments where real estate is a good piece to own in your portfolio. It should be a part of an overall diversification. But these privately held ones, you don't really know what's going on. Where the publicly traded ones, you've got them from companies like BlackRock and Vanguard that you can investigate, and you can see how the financials are working out. When they're this, it's a little bit clouded judgment. But it's not just this, it's other types of investments. We had a client recently kind of give us this, somebody pitched him this oil and gas thing, and he's like, oh, and this client was in their 80s and wanting to take risk with a half of their portfolio because he said, oh, but if oil goes to $85, this could pay you, thousands of dollars. Could, right?
Oh, my goodness.
And most of these are just scams. They spend all the money expenses. They buy themselves lavish vehicles. That's the company vehicle to drive around. And then when they don't have the returns, sorry, we tried, and they go bankrupt. So please, especially as you point out, if you're at or near retirement, you should not be shooting for the moon on returns. That should not be your goal. You need to have a portfolio designed to give you what I like to call a real rate of return. You want to consistently beat taxes and inflation. Therefore, otherwise your dollars are actually going to be worth less if you can't do that. And that's very difficult, especially in this environment. We have a high tax, high inflation environment. And so you need to have a plan. You need to understand how your asset allocation should work, and you should be comfortable understanding what's the likelihood of the returns. And if these investments are promising returns, what's the historical rate of return? Is that performance real? Or is it back tested, et cetera? There's all kinds of things you can look at. We don't, we don't talk a lot about performance because that's not what we focus on. We focus on giving our clients a true holistic plan and growing their money consistently. We are not the shop for people that think we're going to try and knock home runs every day. That's not what we do, not what we recommend retirees do. You need to have someone sit down and explain to you what level of risk, we talked about risk earlier in the show, Chip, what level of risk are you taking? And if you have these type of investments, and I can tell you, we have lots of clients that come in and they've done a good job and they've saved $1 million, $2 million for retirement, and then they pull out this statement, well, yeah, I gave this guy $50,000 about 8 years ago. I've never seen any money back. Is there anything there?
Wow.
And we have a great team. We'll go hunting and checking, and we find out, yeah, it's there, but it's only worth $3,200 or something, and we have to kind of find that stuff. And so it's not fun doing that, but we can do some investigating on these type of investments if unfortunately you feel like you've been felt prey to these. But again, if it's too good to be true, it probably is, the old adage. So take your time, especially when it comes to retirement planning. Think it through, and without income, Chip, there is no retirement. So you need to have investments that you can rely on, and there's no guarantees out there, right? And the word guarantee is a word I don't like to use, but when we use it, we're typically only talking about the full faith and credit of our government, so things like Social Security or railroad retirement, or guaranteed interest on U.S. Treasuries. That's about as good as guarantees get, really. And so understand what's the likelihood or probability that you're going to have the income and the retirement you desire, and have somebody build you a plan.
If someone pitches a home run like this to you, or you're pondering something like that, maybe at the very least take advantage of a 15-minute phone call. Call us and schedule a conversation with one of our licensed advisors, and at least we can talk through it. Now, if you want the comprehensive review with the risk analysis that David's been talking about today, well, that's the report card. And just like the phone call, that's no charge, no obligation. We'll look at your entire financial situation. Maybe you're in good shape. Maybe you need to make a few changes, especially in the level of risk, your risk exposure. That's what we'll do for you. No charge, no obligation. Now, don't forget, estate planning is a key part of your overall retirement plan. And we've got another round of workshops coming up, Wednesday, November 2nd, or Thursday, November 3rd. That's right here at the Midwest Learning Center at Retire Smart, 6:30 in the evening, Wednesday or Thursday. Same class. We offer the same one for your convenience. And finally, the blood drive, Red Cross Blood Drive, Thursday, October 27th. Go to redcrossblood.org and type in Retire Smart in the search box for available times and a map to our place. 402-369-7777 if you'd like a phone call or a report card. 402-369-7777. David, bring us home.
Well, I can tell you inflation, we've been talking about a lot lately, but make sure with those temperatures this past week got down in the teens, you're inflating your tires. I had to hit mine up this week because the tire pressure was going low. You'll get more mileage out of them and save some dollars. Have a blessed and prosperous week. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening to Retire Smart with David Brooks.